I think that the CS has kind of been lazy in their curriculum because it doesn't matter what they teach because, they teach, 80% of it is a waste and 20% of it is good. And then I think you and I could teach the 20% without the 80% and achieve the same result.
Welcome back to the freeCodeCamp podcast. I'm Quincy Larson, teacher and founder of freeCodeCamp.org. Each week, we're bringing you insight from developers, founders, and ambitious people in tech. This week, we are talking to Dr. Chuck, Dr. Charles Severance, computer science professor at University of Michigan, one of the top computer science programs in the world. Dr. Chuck has created many free learning resources over the years, including his Python for Everyone course, extremely popular. He's created courses on C programming language, Django web development framework, so many different things, and he's made them freely available for learners. We've published several courses of his on the freeCodeCamp YouTube channel. Dr. Chuck, it's an honor to have you on the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Quincy, and it is an honor to be on the podcast. You have lots and lots of people, and you're so successful to freeCodeCamp. And I knew you when you were like smaller, but you just keep growing and growing. Your staff, your viewership, and everything. And so it's exciting to see you grow.
Thank you, sir. Again, I don't want to be overly differential, but you have been a huge inspiration to me over the years, and I know to Bo Carnes and to a lot of the folks on the freeCodeCamp team who are building these open learning resources. So I'm just gonna we usually talk about programmer origin stories and stuff like that, but I've got so many things that I want to talk to you about. I'm just gonna dive right into it, and we're gonna start talking about programming, the craft, the art, the thing that most developers do day to day. What is a master programmer?
Well, it is the art and it is the craft. The master programmer is my way of emphasizing that programming is not mathematics, right? Programming is a creative thing. And my origin story is really simple. I mean, I'm an artist at heart. I wanted to be in theater. I mean, I wanted to go to New York City after I graduated from high school. My mom said, "Why don't you go be an engineer first?" And so I'm a very creative person, right? But every time I try to draw art, it's terrible because I just don't have hand-eye coordination, or maybe it's not patience. And when I met computers, I'm like, I can make a hangman game, and I can just sit at my keyboard, and as long as I type it right, then I got a hangman game. And so the key to it was a way of expressing creative artistic concepts, but not requiring like a charcoal pencil to kind of shade everything. And so the master programmer is the same concept, let's just say, applied to carpentry. I know master carpenters, and you can literally drop a master carpenter into any situation, right? You might have like a stairway that's gotten wet and started to rot. And the master carpenter looks in and goes like, okay, I've never seen this situation before, but it's like a jillion other situations that I looked at before. And they all of a sudden creatively are just generating a solution. Carpentry is not just like, order a bunch of stuff and then go and, plug that thing in and make it all happen. And so I think of the master programmer in the same way. And the master programmer are these people that I know who are, mid to late career people that can learn anything, can do anything. You can switch them from Java to React, and they're comfortable in a couple of weeks. And so they're just like amazing, and you can throw them into any situation. And then I think of sort of the way a master carpenter becomes a master carpenter, and I want to imitate that by sort of mentoring, by observation, by slowly learning more stuff and then applying that stuff and getting really good at things. And then eventually you are the master programmer. And so The other reason I'm talking about the master programmer is the one thing that the master programmer is not is a computer science degree. I've literally never met a person who graduated with a bachelor's degree in computer science that I would consider even partially a master programmer. Frankly, they're terrible programmers. Computer science encourages extremely bad programming behavior. And that's because they tell you to do this assignment and you got a week to do it, and then you get it done on time, and then you throw it away, and then they give you a different thing to do, and they give you a week to do it, and you throw it away. That's not what master programmers do. They come into your house, and your stairs have got a rotted part, and they're going to leave your house, and you're going to have a fixed stairs for the next 20 years. And a master programmer is the same way. They can work on software that lives long. It's not maybe the most up-to-date thing. And so I'm kind of like also the enemy of things like LeetCode. I hate LeetCode because LeetCode turns such a creative person. And I'm not saying computer science students aren't creative and aren't smart and aren't wonderful and aren't talented. What I'm saying is they have been taught that LeetCode is the purpose of their life. And that's LeetCode is like the Amazon fulfillment center version of, creative, of artwork, right?
Yeah.
Meaning that LeetCode, you are a robot. I will stick you in this room. I will measure you. I'll watch your blood pressure and heart rate. And then based on your blood pressure and heart rate and how many packages you get done in an hour, then I'm going to give you some numeric rating. And by the way, you're average, which is like, oh, I can't be average. That must be terrible. And so LeetCode, computer science, take away all the humanity of what it is that we do. And if you think, for example, of what you've done since FreeCodeCamp was created, it's not mathematical. It's like you just have to sit and go like, what could we do? Whoa, that's let's try that, right? It's so unmathematical to do something beautiful like what you've done here at FreeCodeCamp.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the kind words. And also, I love that analogy of, when do people build software that actually lasts 20 years? Today, right? It's because there's this focus on getting things done quickly and moving on to the next thing. And like you said, like the Amazon fulfillment of software, as opposed to actually like learning how to do it right and then doing every job right so that it can kind of stand to the rigors of time and not be reclaimed by nature as so many code bases are the moment that the programmer walks away from them, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Well, we are going to talk about computer science programs, and I think it's you're back.
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry.
Okay. So, just a quick heads up. We're using Riverside to record this, and sometimes if people disconnect and reconnect, my apologies to those watching the video version. But yes. So one of the things that you've been a huge advocate of for helping people learn programming is to really encourage people to learn C properly. C being probably one of the most primordial programming languages still in use today. Most things are written in C. It's like when we talk about layers of abstraction, they're usually layers of abstraction on top of C somewhere in the pile of pillows, right? Why should people study C in 2024?
The reason is that the best programmers, like I said, can be dropped into a completely new environment. And you give them 4 weeks, and then they probably will be the best at that new environment than other mediocre programmers who've been working in that environment for years. And the reason is that they have a mental model of what's going on inside of computers. And so they're like, oh, we're going to do Rust and React. Okay, Rust and React is just another syntax, but the computer is the same. And so all they need to do in their 4 weeks of coming up to speed in Rust and React is kind of just glue the Rust stuff to all the wonderful structures that are in their brain already. And so the problem is if we just teach people Python, they're going to be capable of doing things, but they don't understand what's really happening. So if I take someone who's really good in Python and say, you're going to go into a Rust and React project. They're like, how about we convert your 10-year-old Rust and React software to Python so I understand it? And like, no, I didn't hire you to tell me to convert my Rust program to Python. Whereas a master programmer goes like, yeah, Rust is just another thing. I'll figure that out. And how is it that a master programmer can go from Python to Rust and then to Scala and Java and whatever, and just do that every few months as needed, maybe even every few weeks as needed? And so what I'm thinking is, I'm like, how do people get that sort of agility in their mind that nothing is hard for them, nothing scares them anymore? And that's where C comes in. And that is, Python is a great place to start, right? It's kind of a middle level abstraction. There's lots of things that build on top of it, things that, you can do in Python. And it brings people into the technology field and career with the least amount of wasted time. I mean, you just take a Python class, a month or two later, you're ready to do some work, right? You're ready to learn. The problem is you're not ready to be agile. You're not ready to evolve. Think of like Pokemons, right? You get this Pokemon and then you want to evolve your Pokemon. Well, you're a Python programmer. You want to evolve your Python program, and you're not capable of evolving. So learning C, and then later learning hardware, even though it's a very gentle introduction to C and a very gentle introduction to hardware, is an investment in later being able to evolve to anything. Programming language that don't exist, UI frameworks that don't currently exist. If there's one thing in tech, it changes all the time. And so if you want to be ready for what goes on, there is no way you can go to college and learn the 250 different technologies that are being used in the industry today. You got to learn each of those when the time comes. So what can I teach you? I can't teach you C. That's 1978. So that's like 50 years old and 40 years old, whatever. It's old. And if I teach you C, then I can give you the tools that let you learn a new thing every few weeks and master that new thing. Not just like, oh, okay, I printed Hello World in C, then I printed Hello World in Rust, and I put it Hello World in React. No. You got to go in and maintain a large application in Rust and React. And C is the key to that. Because I can't just teach you Rust, and I can't teach you Scala, and I can't teach you all the hundreds of things that you're going to encounter in the real world, but I can teach you C. And I want you to really understand it. And that way you've got a mental model of how computers work. And that's why hardware is important too. So the next class I'm going to create after the C class is a hardware class. But it'll be like everything I do. It'll be gentle and fun. It'll take you a little while, and you walk away with this solid knowledge in the back of your mind that you keep forever, and then you can apply it to any new situation that you run into.
Awesome. And is that course going to also be in the for everybody line? You
Absolutely.
You got C. I think you've got C for everybody. You've got Python for everybody. Django for everybody. You may not know this, but Kylie Ying, she's a software engineer at Google, and she also works at FreeCodeCamp, and she creates courses for us. And a few years ago, I reached out and I said, "Hey, could we do a course called Machine Learning for everybody, and like have it be a spiritual successor to your Python for everybody, because it uses Python, and that course has like 5 million views on YouTube. It's like one of the most popular machine learning courses of all time, and it's very much in the vein of the work that you've already done. Thank you for giving us permission to kind of use that title structure.
It's an honor, and I'm glad that someone other than me is doing AI for everybody, because I find AI too difficult, right? I'm trying to create people who can drop into AI and figure it all out, but I don't want to figure it out myself, right? And so part of with the whole for everybody thing is I got to think very deeply about every second of every course so that I don't inadvertently make it more difficult than it needs to be. So for her to do AI for everybody, thumbs up.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I am very excited to talk about AI. But this hardware thing, I really want to talk about this because a lot of people don't appreciate how networks work, how operating systems work, how things get written to memory, all these different concepts that you learn if you get like a traditional computer engineering degree, which not very many people get anymore because it's the computer science degrees that the employers are looking for, right? Maybe you could talk a little bit about what you think, if you could just almost kind of list like a table of contents of what your course is ultimately likely to contain. That would be really cool, just kind of like information people can put in their back pocket so they can be looking out for those things when they're sifting around for courses on YouTube, or if they're like at the library, like trying to check out some books to like backfill their knowledge and understanding of these things.
Absolutely. I'll get to the table of contents because that's pretty easy. Let me talk about my own education and where I encountered hardware and how it affected me. So, I'm in the middle of a computer science degree, chug, and then I take a hardware class, right? And I all of a sudden sort of get this situation where I'm completely obsessed with like chip layout. And in chip layout, it's very artistic and it's pretty and there's colors and it's like red and blue and black and on this background, and you're drawing these little traces to make chips or to make boards. You draw traces and it's like, this is so visual. And so in this class, we were laying out some AND gates and OR gates and flip-flops using painting, basically, because you paint various materials, then you make masks and they put those materials down and then you make chips out of that. And I saw that and I had this project and I sat down at a computer. Back then it was a Sun workstation. And I literally didn't get up from that computer for 48 hours. I was so like, it's like gamers, right? I just 48 hours laying out chips, learning the software. This is the greatest thing ever. And then I finished the class and I never took another hardware class again, right? Because I didn't need to know how to do that professionally. But the sense of what a professional hardware builder does has been very precious to me. And I loved the kind of quick, brief interlude into how that works. And again, I have no interest in building hardware, none whatsoever. I like software. And so hardware for everybody is just the right sampling. And so the key thing in hardware for everybody, or computer architecture for everybody, is what I call it. First, we're going to start with transistors. And then we're going to build a NOT gate. And then we're going to build a NAND gate. And then we're going to, build a couple other gates out of transistors. And then we will build a flip-flop out of transistors. And then we'll start playing with things like flip-flops and AND gates and OR gates. And we'll make a half adder. Then we'll make a full adder. Then we'll, do a ripple carry adder for like 4 bits. And then we will stop on the hardware, on the low level, like circuitry, ones and zeros, going through traces and wires and turning lights on and turning lights off. That's enough. That's enough. And then what we're going to do is we're going to start looking at machine language. And that is how programs can be written with zeros and ones. I mean, what does it mean it's all full of zeros and ones? Well, it's not really zeros and ones. It's little electric traces that are the little electric pulses that are moving down wires. That's what's going on. And so, but at some point it goes from gates to instructions. So I will have machine language, which is you program, you will write code with zeros and ones. And I will teach you machine language. Then I'll teach you assembly language, which is nothing more than a direct translation to those zeros and ones. Each line of an assembly language program translates directly to a series of zeros and ones. And so we'll write a machine language, we'll write an assembly language, we'll even write a simple assembler. And that's pretty much, well, we will do one little thing where we will run the C compiler and look at the assembler output of a C compiler so we understand how compilers create assembly language and then how that assembly language turns into machine code and how that machine code runs on computers. And so everything that I ever do, and we're not very good at making all my auto graders work well on freeCodeCamp. Everyone has to come to my site like ccfree.com and do the auto graders, which is okay. freeCodeCamp is kind of the video part of it, and my websites are free and they are the auto grader part of it. But the hardest part for the computer architecture for everybody is going to be the auto graders, because I'm going to
Yeah.
build a chip layout system, because I can't find one free. That's kind of me, right? I mean, there are products out there, but I think they're A, too hard, and B, they want to make money off this stuff. They should just give me a free one, but they're not going to give me a free one. So I have got to build an in-browser JavaScript-based chip layout system where I can give an assignment to lay out a chip or lay out a circuit in the browser, and then I can put probe points on that chip, and then I can auto grade the fact that you have actually built a half adder. So I gotta build all that technology, and when I build courses, auto graders come first. The assignments need to scale, and the assignments are where the actual learning happens, not just me talking. And so that's the basic outline, right? Transistors, gates, kind of small circuits made up of gates, machine language, assembler, compiler to assembler. It'll be shorter than most of my courses that I teach.
Awesome. I just want to say, on the note of the auto grader, we're developing our own auto graders around like networks and chips, and like systems on chips. Like, there's only so much you can really simulate in like a browser and accurately test. But we're working with a software engineer who also has like a hardware background, and we're developing kind of our own auto graders for those sorts of things. So we may be able to collaborate on that and make it open source.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta find a way to get learning tools interoperability to your infrastructure so that anybody can write an auto grader in any topic and plug it into your system. That's the key. You and Khan Academy build a complete custom system, and Coursera, that's all just blobbed into one thing for every course. But if you use learning tools interoperability, then you can kind of have a nice bright boundary point where auto grades live out there and the core system that you're doing grading and tracking that lives in here. But and one of these days, you're still Netlify, right?
So we were using Netlify. We may be using it for some things. We just, I mean, we have like more than 100 servers around the world. Like people in Singapore, like we have a Singapore server. So people in East Asia, we've got like Latin American servers. So everybody has like a low ping, and we do have auto graders for JavaScript. We have auto graders for a lot of them just run inside of Google Collaboratory for like the machine learning related tasks. And then we have auto graders for Python. But we'd like to build like a more generic like auto grader where people could essentially have this library that they can include. So that is like a long-term goal of ours. But like pretty much everything we design in terms of interactive learning, we start from the premise of like, how can we test this programmatically so that they don't have to submit something and wait for a human to review it, so that we can keep this like millisecond length feedback loop so people can rapidly iterate. And
it's like a game. You're at a boss, right? You're just struggling with it. You're figuring it out. That's the moment of learning, right? And if we can make something that does not require the delay of a human being involved, that means it's more like playing a video game where you got an hour and you struggle and you learn and you struggle and you learn and then you break through, and then you're like, oh, and you didn't have to wait. And so that's why auto graders are always for me the most important part, because then I make auto graders, then I create assignments in the auto graders, and then I make sure that I have a lecture that supports the learning objectives of what I'm going to assign as homework, right? And so assessments are important, and they're the most intricate to me part of anything. And now you're probably building a much more sophisticated hardware environment than I am, because my circuit layout, the most difficult thing it needs to build is a 4-bit ripple carry adder, which is really tiny compared to like a chip or anything like that. And this is where I'd if you're going to be a professional hardware designer, go get a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering or computer engineering. That's fine. But I think for everybody, we just need to know enough to believe that we could figure it out if we had to. Yeah,
I'm right there with you. Like, and one of the things that you've advocated for over the years is learning fewer things, but learning them more deeply, and
retaining them.
Can you talk about, like, let's say somebody's like a first-year computer science, or maybe they're a fourth year and they're about to graduate, and they have to make up for just kind of coasting along and doing what their teachers have been saying. and they need to backfill, and they need to fill in this knowledge. Or like about a third of the people in the Free Code Camp community are career changers who are coming from completely different fields, maybe accounting, maybe driving a truck, maybe doing any number of different jobs that have various levels of technical proficiency associated with them, or basically not even using a computer as part of their job, right? What advice would you have as far as the few things that they should focus on learning deeply, if you just had to rattle off a list?
Well, I think that Python, C, like any web framework, I picked Django. I mean, everything is going to have the web. There should be some API stuff in there. And I look at like, what are the 4 or 5 courses that you need in order to learn everything else? And I've got this talk I give, and I gave it in India back in February to a bunch of schools. And the idea is I took all the things that you might encounter in the real world at work, and I'm like, okay, among all these topics, which of them fall below the line, which means that we should teach everybody these topics? And I came up with 4 topics, and then 3 more topics. And then I called that the path to the master programmer. And that is, what in effect in 2024 is a computer science degree equivalent? Because computer science degrees were designed in 1978 when it was actually difficult. And so, yeah, it took 4 years. And that's the problem is that they just make it harder, but they don't teach more essential things. And so for me, I want to cut it down to the essentials so that a person who's switching from a truck driving job to a programming job can do so in less than a year. And so the path to the master programmer is Python, C, Django, which is really more about web. Object orientation is a real important learning objective that I don't think is done well in computer science at all. Hardware, JavaScript, Java, and then an internship in open source. And then I'm going to take that truck driver and say, you can go to work. And the first thing that they're going to learn when they go to work is potentially none of those things that I just taught them. Because they'll probably do React and Scala or some crazy thing like that, but they'll figure it out. And so that is my distilling of the essence of a computer science degree into, in effect, 7 3-credit college courses. Now, my secret hidden agenda is the time we should teach these 7 courses is between the age of 13 and 16. Because people who are 15 years old, their minds are like a vacuum cleaner. Because if you want retention, teach somebody something when they're 14, 15, or 16 years old. And the way I teach courses is they're ready for high school. And I got a friend who's a high school teacher, and he keeps testing this. And you'd be amazed at how brilliant they are graduating from high school. And so imagine if we could take 25% of the people graduating from high school and give them what I consider to be the equivalent of computer science bachelor's light, which is what the master programmer is. How would the world change if a person could make $40, $50, or $60,000 as a software developer graduating at 17 years old from high school? What would their next education look like when they don't have to go get a computer science education, when we taught it to them in high school? And I mean, I think that's a fun thing to think about. And the future looks like the past, just later. And that is, wouldn't it be amazing if our children in 10 years could make $60,000 a year out of high school, and then when they went to college, they could take a really cool liberal arts degree? I mean, they're already professional programmers. And then they go on a liberal arts degree, and they're like, yeah, I know how to program. And then I want to be a lawyer, or I want to be an economist. Oh, and by the way, coming along with me is professional programmer skills. So every person who goes into Congress, every person who drives a train, every person who drives a truck is already a software developer, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's why the For Everybody is for everybody. It's really for high school students that, but I don't think anyone would take a class called Python for high school students. But that's really
Right.
what I am building.
That's cool. I had no idea that was like I didn't really think that much about the name, because like freeCodeCamp, like a vast majority of people who use freeCodeCamp are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. We even have some people in their 70s and 80s doing it. But like the median learner age is like 30. So these are people who've already gotten out of college and studied some field that like is difficult to pay off their student debt with a lot of times. Like I studied liberal arts, and I definitely will stand for liberal arts. Like I think like more than a quarter of liberal or of like Fortune 500 CEOs and stuff are like liberal arts majors. It's one of the more common things, and obviously it's a great pathway to working in law and ultimately in working in any kind of creative field, I think. But at the same time, it's not immediately clear what you do with a liberal arts degree when you graduate. Most people just go to graduate school, which is what I did. And I think the notion that like if people already had some skill that they could go and sell on the market, and then they could decide what to do, and they could pursue an actual field that they're interested in, instead of just going into one of the, highest, like they look at like US News and World Report, what are the highest paid majors? And then they basically make decisions around that, because everything is about covering your initial costs and potentially, especially if you're coming from overseas and you're flying to the United States and you're getting like a student visa and all that stuff. How in the world am I going to make this worth it? Because my like 2 generations saved up money to be able to eventually send me to the US to get a degree. Right. So people
Quincy,
basically have this economic imperative.
You have no idea how bad that is getting. And the United States higher ed economy is driven by student visas, and they're not the deal that they once were. We can talk about that if you like. It's kind of scary.
Let's just talk about it now. This is a field near and dear to my heart.
There was something else you said in that. There was something. Oh, the liberal arts. Okay, let me say one thing, and then we'll talk about international students. Let's talk about liberal arts first. Think about this. You went through that whole liberal arts thing. Think about this. You come out of college as a professional programmer, and now you're going to a liberal arts school, but you need some spending money. Do you spend the next 4 years while you're taking cool liberal arts classes making coffee, or flipping burgers, or standing at a McDonald's drive-thru? Or do you work as a remote worker part-time 20 hours a week writing software for companies and making, instead of minimum wage, you're making 20 hours a week, you're making $30,000 a year cash, and you're learning like crazy at the same time as you're taking classes like comparative Shakespearean literature, which is fun as heck when you're 22 years old, right?
Yeah.
And so think of not just the time you're in class in the liberal arts, but think of what you're doing to make money while you're in the liberal arts degree. You're learning on the job to become even better software developers for that 4 years that you're in liberal arts, because you're not working as a barista. I'm saying, but that doesn't mean you can't work as a barista. It just means that you don't have to work as a barista. You'd be surprised. I'm from the University of Michigan, right? It's the ivory tower. Everybody at the University of Michigan is insanely wealthy, and they have drivers to take them to class. Wrong. People at the University of Michigan in the undergrad, when we post an undergraduate position at the University of Michigan, people line up out the door. And that's because some of the students, undergrads, are wealthy from the East Coast, and some are not. And we have to educate everybody. We can't just say, well, we're a Midwest Ivy League-like school, and so we're going to only wait until rich people show up. And the answer is no. We have lots of non-rich people. And I think about if those students at the University of Michigan could be making good money, because they really need survival money. I'm not talking about international students now. I'm talking about, students from the state of Michigan going to the University of Michigan to get the best education you can get in that state. They can't afford to eat. They're hungry. And we just assume that everybody at Princeton or Michigan or whatever can afford to eat. And it's not a good assumption. So that's why I want people to have employable skills before they come to college, so they have the freedom to take a place like the University of Michigan or Princeton and see some really weird course about international economy and say, you know what, I want to take 5 more courses about international economy. And I can because I'm making a decent living. I mean, I went to college making a living because I worked at the university full time. So I had benefits, I had money, I had an apartment, I had a family, and I was going to school for a long time. But it was so fun to go to school and not have to work at a coffee shop 20 hours a week at 2 o'clock in the morning, taken away from my education. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about international students. So the problem with higher education right now, and everyone, like since 1990, has basically said that higher education is running towards a brick wall. Something bad's going to happen. And I'm like, that's not right. That's not right. That's not right. That's not right. And most of the things that they're saying is like, well, if you can learn something on YouTube, therefore you don't need to go to school. But what people don't quite understand is the purpose of an undergraduate education is not to learn anything, but it's to grow up and become an awesome person and learn to meet people. Your high school and your family are all kind of homogenous. And when you go to college, it's people all over the world, and you learn so many things when you first go to college and meet so many people that prepares you for the world that's not exactly the same as the high school that you went to.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's important in high school to kind of not over confuse our young people, let them learn math and algebra and Python and hardware and C, just focus in that little world, and then their minds expand. And so the key to a undergraduate education is mostly to grow up. But then we talk about graduate education. And graduate education is where we have a lot of foreign students, and it's very lucrative. You mentioned people save up for 2 generations to send one child to America so that they can get U.S. citizenship through an H-1B, and their great-grandchildren or great-grandchildren can be U.S. citizens. And it's a beautiful story, right? The problem is that with the last 2 years of turndown in the tech economy, and we can talk a bit about the turndown in tech economy if you like, why I think that is. But with the turndown in tech economy, our graduate students who are not U.S. citizens are encountering job posting after job posting after job posting that in not so many words says foreign people need not apply. Have you heard that?
I know some people that have been going through the H-1B struggle. I know people that have been almost like kind of forced out of their employers just because like that it's cheaper to hire
because it costs
non-foreign
money.
right now.
The employer has to support you in your H-1B effort, and that costs money. And when you have a whole bunch of U.S. citizens just walking around unemployed with lots of skills, not bad people, why bother going through the H-1B fuss if you don't have to? So these companies, slowly but surely, one HR decision at a time, start taking H-1B off the table. And as long as they take H-1B off the table and they get away with it, and there's enough people in the economy and enough, citizens that can be hired, you pretty much make it so that it's really difficult for a non-citizen to get a job and then get H-1B and then become a citizen so that their children can be U.S. citizens, which is what 2 generations in their home country went through.
Yeah.
The beneficiary of up until 2 years ago of that was places like the University of Michigan that can command a high premium, but really what we're selling is H-1Bs, right? The students that come to us are super talented already. They have a whole bachelor's degree in computer science, and they're super talented. We throw a couple years of master's degree, charge them out state tuition, and then, dump them off into the H-1B process. And then that after you graduate, if you don't have a job within 60 days, you literally have to get on a plane and go home. Back to that family that saved 2 generations to get you here. It is not going to take long at all for people to realize that that's becoming a very bad investment, right? I'm saying the quiet part out loud, right? And so the question becomes, the United States has benefited greatly from all these brilliant people coming here and making their whole life sacrifice to be here and to help us and to make our economy better and make us the most creative and productive tech place in the world. But if we're going to shut them off at the border, things are going to change. And universities' revenue are going to, I mean, I'm talking now the top ones, you know, the Michigans, the Harvards. It's if the international student population stops coming, it's not like we can't fill up and do in-state master's degrees. We'll always have people. It's just a massive amount of revenue that we make from that will go away. And honestly, that's to me, as a higher ed person, that to me is the quiet part out loud about the danger of the next 10 years. And you might well guess that I also have a solution to that.
Yeah, well, let's hear your
take me long
solution.
to think about. Well, my proposed solution is we've got to start creating education, high quality education that can be delivered online at scale to all corners of the world at a reasonable cost. So let's just say at the University of Michigan, and by the way, I'm just making this up. No one's agreed to this yet. We make a master programmer certificate, and instead of costing $35,000, it costs $3,000. And instead of 300 students, we have 10,000 students. But you don't have to come to the United States. And at the end of this, not only are you a programmer, but we have an internship. We hook you up with jobs. We hook you up with open source. And I can educate, let's just say, 6,000 to 8,000 people every year, sitting in my comfy Ann Arbor, going to my favorite restaurants, and they don't have to come to the United States, and they don't need 2 generations of savings to get here. And we can still make money on that, right? We can still make money on that. Now, here's the problem. I've been in educational technology software for the last 25 years, and I will just say that all the software that's ever been built in educational technology is not suitable to achieve what I just described. Coursera software is bad, edX is bad, Sakai is bad, Moodle's bad, Canvas is bad. I'm going to guess if I look closely at your stuff, it's bad, meaning it's just kind of like hacked up to face the moment. And I think that in order to build this, the first thing we got to do is build really, really good educational technology software. I mean stuff that eclipses what Coursera is trying to do, and eclipses what edX is trying to do, and eclipses what Canvas is trying to do. Even these are all billion-dollar companies, right? But they don't care because they're making $1 billion. They don't want to make a better piece of software. They just want to keep selling the same crappy software that they've been selling. So that's my solution. And my solution pre-requires building an entire new generation of educational technology that has not been seen on this planet yet. And you think 30 years later, from the mid-90s to today, they've been building these things called learning management systems. You'd think they'd have made some progress. They made progress making money.
That's one way to put it.
And ruining people. They made progress making money and ruining people's privacy. Stealing their data. Don't get me started on privacy.
Okay. Well, I won't get you started on privacy because there's already so much to unpack there. Obviously, we feel very strongly about privacy. I'm very proud to say, if you go to freecodecamp.org/settings, if you scroll to the bottom, you can delete your account and all data we have on you permanently. There's no way back. Like, we literally just delete it. And there's a backup that will get deleted after like a week. Right? So like there's no path to reclaiming your data. And we make it trivial. There's like one, are you sure? Yes. It's done. And
the other thing
I feel
you could
very
do
strongly.
is you could add a thing to that where you say, look, I want you to auto delete my data after 2 years.
Yeah.
And so there's this kind of like rolling thing, like, and if I'm gone 2 years, it's just all gone, right? And I make it so I can extend it if I want, right? You send me a note to say, hey, it's June. We're doing our annual data cleanup. I'm going to clean your data up unless you come and click this button to extend it another year.
That's
if I click the button,
idea.
I can extend it, which means that it's like a dead man switch on a train, right? Where and I stole this from Python Anywhere, by the way. They give a thing that says, your site's going away, but all you got to do is click this button and you got another 3 months, right? And so from a privacy perspective, the key thing is auto-expiring data, right? It's not just getting rid of it, which I like that, and that's good for FERPA and good for all the privacy standards. But auto-expiring data, and the key to auto-expiring data, not that FreeCodeCamp is subject to this, but a commercial company should also auto-expire data, because that commercial company could be sold 10 years from now. So if I use some commercial company to do homework and I upload my stuff to this and my teacher grades it on this uploaded thing.
Yeah.
And that company 10 years later gets sold to, say, a Chinese company, and they didn't auto-expire my data, but I long ago forgot about it, and I really don't care if it exists or not. And then my homework is in China, right?
Yeah.
Not good. Not good. And so that's where we got to learn auto-expire data. So Zoom at the University of Michigan, we've got to configure to auto-expire data after like 18 months or something. And I'm always getting like emails from Zoom saying, we're about to delete your data from 18 months ago. And I'm like, I'm so happy when I see that email. Like, yes, that's what I want. Just, whatever that was, I don't care about it. I mean, it was important 18 months ago. It's like office hours or a lecture or something, but it's 18 months old. Actively delete my stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, for us, like, because people rely on these certifications that we put, like, and we track, like, all the work that they've done, and we want to be able to have, like, a forensic chain of, like, in case there's ever academic dishonesty accusations or something like that.
Yep.
But this is definitely something that I'm thinking about. Like, you got my wheels turning. I hadn't even really thought about that. I think, like,
but
from
make
this,
it trivial to extend. And if they want to keep it for 20 years, keep it for 20 years.
I mean, so many of our emails end up in Gmail's spam box anyway that I am kind of worried that a lot of people will be like, I never got the email and all my data is gone. And then we'd be spending a whole lot of support time trying to explain to people, sorry, we really can't get your data back. Like, I'm sorry this went to spam. Like with my email newsletter, I just culled my email newsletter from 7 million people down to, less than 100,000 people. And the way I did that was I sent out an email and said, hey, if you're enjoying this email and you want to keep getting it, please click, like, fill out this form real quick. Like, it's like, just confirm, basically. And yeah, like, a whole lot of people were probably, it was showing up in their spam box, or they were just like, filtering it out. Oh, I'll get to this someday, maybe, but the result is fewer people are getting the email, but it's the people who really want it. So I do like this notion. There's so many things we could talk about privacy. Like, again, like, I'm a huge believer in respecting people's privacy and asking for the bare minimum information. All you need for a FreeCodeCamp account is, like, literally an email. It can be a fake email. We're not going to stop you from using 5-minute mail or whatever, but you're not going to be able to auth after that, because we don't use passwords, because passwords are a huge security thing. So we do, like, basically we use one-time pins to get into your account, for example. So like, we're thinking about all these things, but I want to get back to what you said, because I think it's worth noting, like, a lot of people may not know what Sakai is, but you mentioned it. You mentioned, like, Sakai is probably not, like, good enough. Coursera, all these other companies, and you mentioned, FreeCodeCamp, and of course we're actively working to improve and to build a more general purpose, validation environment to, like, be able to validate that people have actually completed assignments and being able to test different things. But Sakai is your own project. So I just want to point out, like, if people haven't heard of that, the humility, and you mentioning that, that your own stuff is not good enough either, and that you're working on it. Can you talk about Sakai real quick?
Absolutely. Sakai is an open source learning management system competing with Blackboard, Moodle, Canvas, and Desire to Learn as an enterprise learning management system. And we were founded in 2004, and we ended up peaking at about a 6% worldwide market share in like 2008, and we've been sinking ever since. Canvas basically is the current market leader in this space, and they stole all our ideas, and they stole all the standards that I helped build. There's the standards, the IMS Learning Tools Interoperability Ring of Compliance. Canvas is on there, but they changed their logo since I put the tattoo on. And what happened that makes why Sakai doesn't have a 6% or even 100% market share is that universities, IT organizations have given up on the notion of protecting student privacy. And they just want a cloud provider that they, like Google or Facebook, that's going to make it so they don't have to worry about the software. Sakai is open source software, and so there's some worry involved in it that you got to run servers. If it goes down, if there's a bug that needs fixing, you got to kind of go fix it. Whereas if you just outsource to a cloud provider like Canvas, you don't have to think about it. I mean, our Canvas was down for 3 days at the beginning of the semester, and the IT people were just cool as a cucumber because it's like, it's down, but it's not my problem, right? And it's very secure. If they were running Sakai at that same point in time, they would be people on site 24 hours a day, and so the IT organizations of these colleges are making convenience choices for the IT organization that are completely compromising the student privacy. And so Sakai is a competent piece of software that's on par with all these other ones. The difference is Sakai is not purely a cloud offering. Blackboard, Canvas, Desire to Learn is purely a cloud offering. Moodle and Sakai are open source, which means you can, as a school, keep the data in your own hands rather than just give it to a company that could be sold on a whim any day. You wake up in the morning and you got a contract with them that says you'll be notified when they're sold. And the answer is, yep, you'll be notified when they're sold, but your data is gone by noon. And you're like, well, I'm going to sue you for that. And the answer is, yep, you sue, but by then the money's all gone and it's whatever. So the thing that really annoys me about learning management system marketplace is that IT organizations are making decisions based on their staff's and CIO's convenience, and they are making a powerful choice that is the wrong choice for their students' privacy.
Yeah.
They are handing that data off to third parties without even telling the students that their homework assignment on human sexuality is in the hands of a private company that could be sold anytime.
Yeah.
Because if they express it that way, the students will be like, I'm not going to turn my homework in anymore. But they don't express it that way, right? They're like, and it's the IT people that are like, got their motivations all screwed up because they don't have talented people in IT anymore. So that's Sakai. Sakai's awesome, but the key thing that why I say Sakai, I need to beyond Sakai, I need to beyond Coursera, I need to beyond edX. And it has to do with that high school thing we talked about, because what you are not capable of doing with freeCodeCamp and what Sakai is not really capable of doing is also being a publisher into other people's learning management systems of content. People have to come to freeCodeCamp, they experience it on freeCodeCamp, but what if a high school in Singapore wanted to take a course from freeCodeCamp and teach it on their system? Not just tell all the kids, go log into freeCodeCamp, show me your certificate, when you're done, I'll give you a grade. No. It needs to be resources like a publisher like Pearson and Pearson My Math Lab, et cetera. Like what they would do, what Pearson did with My Math Lab is they plug it into whatever school from 7th grade to PhD. They plug it into wherever you're at, and nothing, including Sakai and what you've written, does that. And so we need to think like a publisher. And so that's why I need to build a whole new generation of these things that look much like learning management systems, but also function as publisher systems. And so the problem is we've sort of just gone off into this like teach a course, but we haven't thought so much about authoring and reuse, modification, and sharing courses, because college professors don't want to think about teaching until August 27th, and then on May 15th they want to stop thinking about teaching. And so it's okay. So, but we need a whole new generation of software. Yeah. Which I'm working on.
Awesome. Yeah. And I'm excited about this because, again, you're correct. Like freeCodeCamp, like technically it's open source. Any university professor or any, admin at a high school could just spin up a local version of freeCodeCamp, or even just white label and have it be like, Charger High, computer science program, and it could basically be freeCodeCamp running, and that's totally fine. That's within the terms of freeCodeCamp is open source. We use the BSD3 license, which is extremely permissive. The only restriction that BSD3 has that MIT doesn't have is you can't pretend that you're freeCodeCamp, and that's for obvious reasons, because we don't want people capitalizing on our goodwill.
Free and open folks are very protective of trademarks, and that's appropriate.
Yeah, and we have ironclad trademark here in the U.S. and other municipalities as well. Other regions, because we don't want scammers to pretend they're freeCodeCamp and rip people off.
Yeah.
So, wow. Like talking about higher education, what would your advice be to a learner who's in India? Because we have a lot of people like FreeCodeCamp's community. The way to look at it is like America is by far the biggest segment of people who use FreeCodeCamp, the United States specifically. Then we have India is second, and then we have Brazil, Nigeria, and then like Europe. If you want to look at like the EU area and the UK, like that would be kind of like the there's a lot of people over there that use it too. But like India is huge, and you just got back from India. You flew over there. My understanding is you went to like 10 different universities,
Yes.
like some whirlwind tour. Can you talk about what that was like? And then my main goal is to like understand what that was like, but also to understand for Indian people that are watching this who are thinking about traveling to the U.S. to get a master's degree, like what they should consider doing, or people who are hoping to send their kids to the U.S. to get a master's degree. Like you are an authority on computer science education, and like I would, presume also international students coming to the U.S. to try to study computer science and get H1Bs and work as software engineers. Like, you know a lot more about that than I do.
So first off, my 2-week trip to India I got to feel like what it was like to be a celebrity in a real tiny little narrow world of computer science. And that I was treated very well. And, people were applauding, and there was standing room only rooms with 3,000 people in it. And cars would take me places, and food and airplane flights, not private jets or anything, but it was just fun to kind of be a celebrity. So I think, and I actually think, Quincy, you are way ahead of the curve on this particular topic. You may or may not know that you're ahead of the curve on this particular topic, but I'll tell you what I envision 10 years from now, and then what I'm going to try to put into place is we have historically thought of India as a place where you can kind of outsource stuff, but you can't trust them. You got to, and then you hire someone in India to hire the people in India, and then you're still not happy because you think, I can't hire people directly in India. And like, well, how would that work? And so there's been this kind of like outsourcing business where all the Indian computer scientists work for companies who then resell them to the United States to do kind of crap work, right? The work we just don't want to do. And that's completely the wrong model. That's completely the wrong model. The other alternative is you save for 2 generations, you come to the United States, and then you go work in Silicon Valley. That's also completely the wrong model. Here's what the right model is. The right model is that people who live in India like living in India. Their families are there. Their food is there. They just like people love India. It's a great place to live. It's a great place to raise a family. There's lots of things about the Indian culture that, that are just unnatural, and when they come to America, it's unnatural. So how can't we come up with a scheme by which, given what we learned in the pandemic about remote work, can't we come up with a scheme by which companies simply directly hire Indian individuals and make them just part of the team? And in doing so, they pay them probably a quarter of the amount of money they'd have to pay them to live in Silicon Valley. They live in their culture. They enjoy their culture. Within their culture, they're very well paid. And then you just treat them like any other employee, right? And I see you're nodding because you're already doing this, and I know you are already doing this.
We have lots of teams from team members from South Asia.
But they're not hidden behind some kind of like firewall of a consulting company.
Right.
They're just people on your team that happen to show up in Zoom like everybody else shows up in Zoom, right?
Yeah.
And you know them and you get to grow and care for them. Now then imagine for a moment that you were a bigger company and you could afford to fly them to the United States for a while and, have like a company retreat and take all your Indian employees and your Singapore employees and bring everybody in the United States, and so that they could enjoy United States, they could get to know it, they could like eat our food, and then they'd be like, oh, your food's no good, I want to go home and eat really good food in my home country, right? And so we got to get to the point where we the United States companies and organizations can benefit from this amazing pool of talent, but without hiding behind like the contractors, right? They're just employees, and we've learned to use Zoom since 2020. We know it. And so, like you, I have an Indian employee. I figured out how taxes work. I figured out how to write paychecks to Indian people, and it's easy and it's great. And there's companies that make it really, really easy for a U.S. organization to hire someone directly in India. And then they're just another employee. And you, again, locality, post-pandemic, locality is less and less of an issue. If we could fix it so that they could come on a tourist visa or a business visa for 2 weeks and enjoy meeting them in person. So when I went to India, I met my employee in person because it just turned out that he lives in one of the cities that I was in. And so I met him, and he's doing really well. I don't pay him nearly as much as I would pay a U.S. employee, and yet he is upper middle class where he lives, right? He's paying debts off and living a good life and whatever, and it's costing me not nearly as much money as it would cost to have the same talent in the United States. So what do we need to have that happen? Well, it would be great if we had an educational system that at the end of their education, they had some internships. And the internships were global and distributed. And there was an organization that mediated all this. So that maybe, there would be like a kind of a code camp where, people all over the world would participate in this post-education camp where they're learning to work with people, they're learning to work on professional software, there's workshops, there is internships, there is connection between employers and employees, there is funds from nonprofits to this hypothetical organization that creates free camp-like experiences around the world for technologists, and we just scale the crap out of that. I mean, does that sound like an okay thing?
Yeah, I think that'd be amazing. If it involves interfacing with the U.S. government for visas and stuff,
right? You're the closest to it, right? That's why the name of your company, Free Code Camp, is about togetherness, not just free education, but it's about togetherness.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything that interfaces with the U.S. government and the visa system, I used to be a school director, and I worked for this big Japanese conglomerate. We had schools. I ran a school in China. I ran schools here in the United States. And it was such an ordeal, even with this giant corporation that was really old, 50, 60 years old, that had all these connections with the State Department and had this entire team that understood government relations and all this stuff. It was an ordeal to be able to get people to come to the U.S. And what you just said earlier about flying our Indian team members, we have a team member in India. We have 2 in Bangladesh. We have 1 in Pakistan. And then we have 21 different countries are represented on the Free Code Camp team. 36 people, 21 different countries, right? It is an ordeal to get even a tourist visa to get people. Mrugesh, who's basically the head of all of our infrastructure. He's kind of the equivalent of the CTO at Free Code Camp, right? He has been waiting for a year to get his visa interview, so hopefully he'll be able to come next year, right? But it's just, it's a lot of paperwork, and I don't really have the heart for it, to be completely candid. As much as I would like to bring people together, I'm not the right person to do that. But maybe there could be a charity that's focused on that we could potentially partner with. I mean,
I'm talking about things 10 years. I'm not talking about you got to do it next week, right?
Oh, okay.
We know it's hard, right?
Yeah.
But we've got to lay down a path in front of us that eventually leads to that as a natural thing, right? We're doing what we can do right now. I think the thing we got to work on in the short term is distributed scalable internships. But the problem with that is that students have to have enough talent to be worthy of that, because you can't just say, I don't know anything about programming. I'm a truck driver. Why don't I start with an internship? And the answer is, you will be ejected from that internship at a very high velocity, right? Because you're useless.
Yeah.
Mentoring only happens when you have skills. It doesn't happen because you want skills. It happens because you have skills. And so our job, yours and mine, is to create a curriculum where they get the skills so that when they're sort of nominated for an internship, people go like, ooh, yummy. That's the kind of skills I could use at a very low cost, and it's all taken care of by whatever. And now I can get them to work on my project. And in a year, I'm going to just hire them anyway. So away we go. And so that to me is the thing, is it's not just let's do internships. Let's not just have free code camps around fires around the world. If there's no skills involved, and non-trivial skills, right? This is back to the master programmer. So for me, the master programmer is the prerequisite to entry into internships, because I don't like mentoring people who have no skills. I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah. And the reason why these internships are so selective in like Silicon Valley, and the reason why they are so remunerative is a twofold reason from the way I understand it. One, they want to identify the best talent before they even bring them in. They want to make sure they're actually going to be able to productively get things done. And it's also like kind of a cheap pipeline for identifying talent that they can bring on. Because like most of the people I know that got an internship at Google or Microsoft or like a big tech company, they also at the end of that internship got extended like a job offer, and then they could join.
Absolutely.
And that was basically like corporate training for being able to join their company. It's kind of the equivalent of going through like an employee boot camp, almost being an intern. And I agree, internships are great because they're paid, and they work within the U.S. framework of visas. And I know we're talking about letting people stay in their home country and not having to go through this, naturalization process. My wife went through that naturalization process, by the way. We met when I was in grad school in China, in Tianjin, and she eventually, came to the U.S., got a green card, worked here for many years, and was able to naturalize as a U.S. citizen. But like it was a big ordeal, and apart from reforming the immigration system, which we don't talk a lot about political things on the Free Code Camp podcast, but like I'm a huge believer in making it much easier for skilled immigrants to come to this country. And I'm very vocal about that. I'm not going to put you on the spot and see what you think about immigration or anything like that. But like, apart from making it easier for talented people to come and work and contribute to the economic activity, help us build up the tech ecosystem here in the United States, pay taxes, all of those things. I do love the idea of just making it easier for people to get promising internships and helping more companies realize that internships are a path forward and that they can actually get really talented internships, so that like even small businesses could potentially have interns that have a certain baseline of skills who can come on board, and there's an independent arbiter of those skills. Right now, the arbiters of those skills are like Linux Foundation, CompTIA, and of course, university degree programs, whom it sounds like you would say those degree programs, like computer science programs, are not sufficiently robust in helping sort people who are ready for an internship from people who just coasted through a CS program and aren't even that passionate about it, just went because their parents pushed them to go to CS because it's a remunerative degree program, right?
Yeah, I think that the CS has kind of been lazy in their curriculum because it doesn't matter what they teach, because they teach 80% of it is a waste and 20% of it is good. And then I think you and I could teach the 20% without the 80% and achieve the same result. Yeah. I mean, from an immigration perspective, what if the demand isn't there in the United States, and we just can't assume that the demand has been infinite for 35 or 40 years for new software developers, because that's the crash in the software industry, right? And so let me I got to go to my flying lesson in a little bit. You're looking at the clock and I'm looking at the clock.
Yeah.
So I got to go to my flying lesson a bit. The reason, in my opinion, for the crash in the tech industry, and the reason it's not going to recover, is simple. In 2006, Google needed to build a low latency distributed file system, a thing that had never been invented and never been built, that could have like 11 copies of your data and have 12 nines of reliability. And so in 2006, they needed 5,000 software developers to solve that extremely difficult problem properly. What problem? And then they had to do like big table and then they used PageRank, and then they did this, and they did that. The question, if you look at Amazon, let's just say you're the CTO of Amazon right now. What are the 5 most important strategic innovations that Amazon needs to do right now in terms of its infrastructure and whatever? Can you think of anything that Amazon even needs to do that would require 1,000 people, technology-wise?
I mean, I have a limited, view into like what their day to day. I mean, if they're going to be serious about drone delivery, maybe that would be an area like that they would need to invest a lot of software engineering. Yeah, but I can't really think of anything off the top of my head.
How about we invent a technology that makes it so robots can do pick and pull in large warehouses so that we can more efficiently fill trucks up so people can get stuff in 1 day instead of 2 days? Why don't we hire a bunch of people to figure out that robot technology? Oh, wait, it's already done, right? So that's the problem, right? You look at the things that Amazon, Google, Facebook, Twitter, and you look at what they've accomplished so far, they have achieved a lot. And the as yet unachieved things are way smaller in 2024 than they were in 2012 or 2006. So we shouldn't expect that whatever the number of software developers Amazon needs that has now shrunk is going to get big again. That's not saying it's zero, right? Because drone delivery and who knows what else, right? But man, there has been a lot of technology achievement in the last 20 years. And these guys have products and systems and trucks and people, and that stuff works, and you don't need to invent a new thing, right? Maps, worldwide accurate maps, solved. I'm not saying it doesn't need any software developers. It just doesn't need tens of thousands of software developers. So that notion, if you think about why we needed an H-1B, and I'm not anti-H-1B, I'm just looking at the things that lead to the lack of demand, the reduced demand that I think is permanent. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't need any programmers. We just don't need the kinds of people with a PhD in computer science that they needed at Google in 2010. It's never coming back. And so what you and I need to do is we need to educate a populace for the things the market actually wants in 2024, not pretend that it's still 2010.
Yeah.
And so we think about how does that work? And that gets us back a bit to the problems that really are important are people problems, and the technical problems are getting easier and easier. So if we kind of start teaching technical stuff in high school and letting people take liberal arts degrees and work great with people and create wonderful distributed teams to solve whatever human problem we need to solve, that is, the humans will always want a new thing, right? They'll want a new Uber-like thing, and that's going to take some work, but the human problems are as important as the technology problems if you're starting a company like Uber. So
yeah. How many minutes do you have before your flight lesson? I want to make sure you make that. And but I do have like a ton of additional questions.
We got about 5 more minutes.
Okay, I'm just gonna fire these off.
5 more minutes.
Fire these off. First of all, you're doing flight.
Round.
Like this is like a soft question, but you also, in addition to flying planes, you race cars. What's the story behind that?
I do race cars. Well, I just like I like very organic racing, local racing. I don't like F1 or NASCAR or anything like that. What I really like doing is driving fast around a track in a track-prepared car so that so I don't have to speed to get my jollies on entrance ramps to highways. And so I can afford, I race in this thing called the 24 Hours of Lemons, which is supposedly a $500 car that races a 16-hour endurance race. But it just lets me get my excitement out of my system without having to be highly testosterone-y. So I'm not I'm like, I have 5 people on my race car, my racing team. I am either the worst or the second to worst racer, meaning in terms of you look at the times, my times are terrible compared to my brother and my nephew. But we don't care because we're not trying to win. We're just trying to really enjoy the day and drive around the track. So it's a very a fun hobby. We like preparing the cars and building them, and so that's where the racing hobby comes in.
Awesome. Well, we didn't even have time to talk about AI. If I know you've answered this question like repeatedly when you were traveling through India, and probably a whole lot since then. But if you had just like a 1-minute answer to why people shouldn't be worried specifically about AI as programmers, but you know all the other things that you mentioned that they should be worried about, what would be like?
So I was asked the question of why take any classes when AI is going to solve every problem.
Yeah.
And in a space of 14 days, I gave the same talk over and over and over again and answered that question over and over and over again. And as I was experiencing all the other things, I was refining the answer to that question. So I got to the point in the second to last one where I came up with an answer that silenced the whole room, right? They're like, why should I learn to program with AI? And it happened because they were giving me a tour at the lovely professional university in northern India, and they were showing me people working on drones, building new drones. And I walked into that room, and these young people were showing me their drones. And the thing that was going off in my head is like, aren't drones a solved problem? I can go to Best Buy and buy a drone. And I go like, and it just drives around. Are drones a solved problem? And then I started thinking about this, because I'm old enough to remember when we first started hearing about quadcopters and AI and Wi-Fi and coordination of them. And I remember seeing videos of a person starting up a quadcopter, and it like crashed. They got nets all around it, and it crashes into the wall and breaks into a million pieces, and they make another quadcopter. And I'm thinking, like, there was a time when we, the world, did not know how to make quadcopters. So here's what I'm telling you to do. Let's just say quadcopters were not in existence in 2000. So what I want you to do is I want you to grab all the NVIDIA processors you want, and I want you to put those in a suitcase and grab all the like AI wizards that you can grab, software developers and stuff, and I want you to time travel back to 2000. And I want you to arrive in 2000, and you plug NVIDIA processors in, you plug the internet in, and you say, LLM, read everything in the world today. And so we take an LLM back to 2000, and the LLM reads everything in 2000. And the LLM finally comes up, like in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The LLM comes up, and the people gather, and we're going to ask it one question. And that is, I am interested in building a quadcopter that's automatically self-leveling, that uses Wi-Fi to find its way. Wi-Fi existed in 2000. Uses Wi-Fi to find its way around, and I want to hold a thing in my hand and drive it around. That AI, the perfect genius of all humanity's future, has no data in 2000 to invent a quadcopter. Nothing. It's like, what's a quadcopter? Right? That's it. That's all you get from it. And so we're excited about the fact that it's looking backwards in time at already solved problems, and it can regurgitate the already solved problems with a little remixing a bit. And we're like, that's the future. And the answer is, no, that's not the future. The future is things we can't even conceive of. So AI doesn't help us with the things we can't conceive of. It does help us with the things that are past. It's a really good search engine, and I love it. I mean, it's great. I use it all the time. But to say that there is no need for future-looking creativity or any kind of research because AI is going to do it for us, the answer is no, it's not. It's terrible at looking forward. It really is terrible at looking forward. It's great at looking back. So there's that. That's the AI thing. And when I said that finally, they're like, oh, yeah, you're right. It can't know things that it's not been told.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's very much my sentiment. Like, it's great. I use it almost like as a replacement for Google in some situations. Like, if I have a long tail query that Google's, I know I'm just going to get gibberish on Google, I'll go and ask it, and it does a decent job. Or if I needed to make it like really specific associations, like with language learning stuff, it's super useful. I really appreciate your time sharing these insights, sharing the reassurance that people are still going to need to learn programming. People are still going to need to have domain expertise. People are still going to need to do all the things they're doing today even though we have this tool that makes it much easier to synthesize past knowledge, it's not going to create new knowledge, right? I mean, it may be able to do very specific things like go out and try all these novel combinations of, like for drug discovery, for example. I think it's got a lot of potential in that area, but it's not going to be able to do anything you don't really tell it to do within like a kind of a bounded space. So thank you again for your time, Dr. Chuck. It's been an absolute honor having you on the podcast. You've been on my list of guests to have for literally years at this point. And I'm very excited to meet with you, hopefully talk with you some more about the future of higher education, practical kind of like vocational programming education. Is there any message you want to leave people with before we sign off?
I think the importance of FreeCodeCamp is going to go up, not down. I mean, I think that there are things about your model that are more scalable and sustainable than any other model for educating the world.
Thank you. I'm going to incorporate as much of your feedback as possible, and we're going to keep this momentum going that we have with the FreeCodeCamp community. Thanks again for all your support, for all your thoughtful feedback over the years, and for creating these amazing free learning resources, many of which we're publishing on FreeCodeCamp. So be sure to check the show notes, and you can see some of Dr. Chuck's amazing coursework. I'll also include links to some of your various websites. Thanks again, Dr. Chuck.
Thank you, Quincy.
And until next week, everybody, happy coding.
Cheers.